The 7 Hermetic principles. The principles of truth are 7. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. The Kybalion. Chapter 2. Now these 7 principles are just principles or laws of manifestation. And thus, this book does not really teach you that which all manifestation bursts out of. It only gives you intellectual knowledge of it, but it cannot truly show you, because only the spirit can show you the things of that nature, or of its nature, should I say. But this book is not into pointing you to that spirit. That's more of what I try to do, is bring people to see the world as it truly is. So you have to deconstruct their beliefs of what is real in order to see it. But this book basically is going to go through these 7 principles of manifestation, or laws of manifestation, that are fixed in manifestation. Okay, so the 7 Hermetic principles upon which the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows. 1. The principle of mentalism. 2. The principle of correspondence. 3. The principle of vibration. 4. The principle of polarity. 5. The principle of rhythm. 6. The principle of cause and effect. And 7. The principle of gender. These 7 principles will be discussed and explained as we proceed with these lessons. A short explanation of each, however, may be given at this point. 1. The principle of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. The Kybalion. Now this first maxim right here, the all is mind. The universe is mental. I agree that the universe is all mental. We are in the mind of God. The whole universe is the mind of God. But the all, it has capitalized, is mind. I would not agree that the all is mind. I have a brother out of England I've talked to before, and I like his quote. He says, all is mind, meaning everything manifested is mind. But mind is not the all, meaning the mind is not the all or the source. Mind is just a projection of the source, or an emanation of the source, or a manifestation of the source. Just as I mentioned earlier about your dream, your mind projects a dream world and then localizes itself as one of the individuals in the dream. And so although you feel, touch, taste, smell, think in your dream from a localized point of view, all of it is your mind. Even the localized person is you in your mind. And so all of it is you. All of your dream is not you, the person who's seeing from inside the dream, but all is the mind of the one who is asleep, the dreamer, which is not in the dream. And it's the same as the waking world. All is a dream of God. And so, and God is localized in every being in his creation. That's the difference. You and your dream are localized from one point of view, but God is localized in all point of views, if we can use that word. He is seen from all the point of views. And so this is why it is told to man, know thyself, because in your dream, if you're in a dream and you're seeing your dream from a localized point of view, from a person or that you think you are, if you truly knew, if that person in the dream truly found out who they were, they would know that they are not the person in the dream. They are actually outside of the dream, and nothing in the dream can touch them. Thus they would notice that they are immortal inside the dream, free inside the dream, at peace inside the dream. These are the same things religions around the world try to teach you, to find that which is immortal, which is peace, which is happiness. This is the kingdom of God. So when you find out who you truly are, you will find out you're not a localized person in the dream, but you are that which the whole dream manifests in and out of. And so the all is mind. I don't know if it's going to clear it up as we go along, but I do not agree with that concept. It says this principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances which we know under the terms of the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that is apparent to our material senses, is spirit. Okay, I agree with that. This all is spirit. And in the spirit manifests all these things, such as mind and matter. And it's none other than spirit. Mind is none other than spirit. Matter is none other than spirit. These are different forms of spirit that we put labels on and call them matter. And we give reality to matter as if matter came before spirit. You understand what I'm saying? And this is how most of the material scientists think. But it says the all is spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as an universal, infinite living mind. And I agree, it's unknowable from the sense of the senses or the mind, but it can be known through experience. It also explains that all the phenomenal world or the universe is simply a mental creation of the all, or God. And it says the all, it just means God in religious terms. And I agree with that. So everything in the universe is a mental creation or a dream of the all, or God, subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole and in its parts or units has its existence in the mind of the all, or in the mind of God, in which mind we live, move, and have our being. And this quote is taken from the Bible, which Paul was speaking to some Greeks. And he said, in this God is not far from us, because this God is verily us. And he said, in God we live, move, and have our being. Just like in your dream, the person you perceive yourself to be, and everything in that world of your dream world is made of you. All of it exists in you, moves in you, and it has its being in you, or your mind. This principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the very mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of the public attention, and which, without such explanation, are non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. And again, if we do not understand that the whole world is mental, or in the mind or dream of God, take anything, just take you for instance. If you want to build or make, say, a sandwich, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the thought first manifests in your mind, and then it manifests outward into reality. And so this whole world that manifests, right, is just the thoughts or mental creation of God. So when you see trees, lakes, rivers, these are not man-made. These are made from the thoughts of God, just as man is made, just as even your thoughts are made of this same God, although you think it is you creating these thoughts, or the same reality, the same truth. An understanding of this great Hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to readily grasp the laws of the mental universe, and to apply the same to his well-being and advancement. The Hermetic student is enabled to apply intelligently the great mental laws instead of using them haphazardly, in a haphazard manner. With the master key in his possession, the student may unlock the many doors of the mental and psychic temple of knowledge and enter the same freely and intelligently. This principle explains the true nature of energy, power, and matter, and why and how all these are subordinate to the mastery of mind. One of the old Hermetic masters wrote long ages ago, "He who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery." And these words are as true today as at the time they were first written. Without this master key, mastery is impossible, and the student knocks in vain at the many doors of the temple. 2. The principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. The old Hermetic axiom ran in these words: as above, so below. As below, so above. And the grasping of this principle gives one the means of solving any dark paradox and hidden secret of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that would otherwise be unknowable to us. This principle is of universal application and manifestation on the various planes of the natural, or the material, mental, and spiritual universe. It is an universal law. The ancient Hermeticists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man was able to pry aside the obstacles which hid from the unknown, or which hid from view the unknown, should I say. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis to the extent that a glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught. Just as knowledge of the principles of geometry enabled man to measure the distant and their movements, to measure the distant suns and their movements while seated in his observatory, so a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the monad, he understands the archangel. And so basically what this principle is saying is all this is giving you is intellectual knowledge, really. And all intellectual knowledge is really, in essence, learned ignorance. Because unless you have knowledge of, as this book puts it, the all, of the source, or of God, all other knowledge is just learned ignorance. And this is what I learned. Once you find that which you are, or that spirit which you are, all that you have learned before that is just mental clutter. You understand? And clarity is provided of the reality of how life is, opposed to just the knowledges of the relative world. So as above, so below, also that can correspond with as within, so without. And an example is, most people see the world as good and evil. It's because you see good and evil. A man who is at peace within sees nothing but peace without, and vice versa. 3, the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The Kybalion. And I liken this to a symbol or a metaphor I love to use, which I learned from one of my, or a teacher of mine, and that is of the colorless screen, right? The colorless screen assumes many colors and thus appears to be a human or a landscape, or it appears as a human, the colorless screen, or a landscape, or a building, but never actually becomes any of those. So the same with your colorless light of pure spirit assumes many forms and names and shapes in this life, but never actually becomes any of them. And the thing is, we assume we are one of the colors and shapes and names on the screen of our being. See, in the screen of your being, if you just open your eyes, you see many things. All these things appear in you. Even the body you see appears in you. So you cannot be the body. But it says nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. So if we take the symbol of the colorless screen, it is at rest. So is that spirit that is within you. It is at rest. And all the motion of the pictures on the screen are moving and vibrating. Everything on the screen moves. Nothing rests on the screen. No thing rests. But the screen is not a thing. The screen of pure spirit is not a thing, as all the things that appear in it. And so everything on the screen moves and vibrates. But yet, when that disappears, the screen does not disappear. All the movement on the screen does not touch or stain the screen. The screen is ever present, untouched, unmoved by all the movement. And that is where peace resides. That is where the kingdom of God is, of the Holy Scriptures, the abode of God. And that colorless, motionless thing that takes on our colors, shapes, and form is your true essence that we must find. But like I said, this book describes the manifested world, or the mind of this screen, and the objects of it. So the principle of vibration embodies the truth that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. Facts which modern science endorses, and which each new scientific discovery tends to verify. And yet this Hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago by the masters of ancient Egypt. This principle explains that the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration. From the all, which is pure spirit, down to the grossest form of matter, all is in vibration. The higher the vibration, the higher the position in the scale. The vibration of spirit is at such a high infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that it is practically at rest, just as the rapidly moving wheel seems to be motionless. And at the other end of the scale, there are gross forms of matter whose vibration are so low that it seems to be at rest. Between these poles, there are millions upon millions of varying degrees of vibration. From a corpuscle, and an electron, an atom, and a molecule, to the worlds and universes, everything is in vibratory motion. This is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration, and also on the mental planes, whose states depend upon vibrations, and even onto the spiritual planes. An understanding of this principle with the appropriate formulas enables Hermetic students to control their own mental vibrations as well as those of others. The mastery also applies this principle to the conquering of natural phenomena in various ways. He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the specter of power, says one of the old writers. 4. The principle of polarity. Quote, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pairs of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. The Kybalion. And I did a radio show not too long ago on the paradox of good and evil. And it's the same thing. All paradoxes are reconciled. All things that seem to be opposed are reconciled and are actually the same thing, just on different degrees of the plane. For instance, man and God are two opposites that can be reconciled. And that's why the Bible says Christ reconciles all things. All paradoxes are reconciled in the absolute truth. In absolute truth, all relative truth is birthed out of. And let me give you an example of how all polarities are one and the same. Let's take a simple one like East and West. East and West are the same thing. And they also meet at a point, right? East and West must meet. Let's say they meet in the middle, wherever the middle is. Well, that middle point is still east of that which is west, if that makes sense. And it's still west of that which is east. So that middle point is still east in perspective to something and west in perspective of something. It don't matter how far you go down the plane. If you go all the way to the end, to, let's say, the east side of the plane, everything to the left of it is west. And there's still something to the right of it, which is east. So it's a never-ending chain in all paradoxes, whether it be north and south, up and down are the same. Up and down, all these paradoxes are relative in this relative existence. And the paradoxes cannot be reconciled until you reconcile that which you think you are, or merge that which you think you are into your source. And you will see all is just one, or all just is. If we look at up and down, well, I'm 6'3". I'm up to my child who is 3 foot. But to my smallest child, she is up to my middle child. Or a tree is up to me. Or I am up to the grass, but the grass is up and the grass is down to me, but the grass is up to a hole in the ground. So it's all relative. Nothing is true. Like, you can't say this is up and that's fact, because that up is also down to another relative perspective. And so this is what it's saying. All paradoxes may be reconciled. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual. Everything has two poles. Everything has its pair of opposites, all of which were old Hermetic axioms. It explains that the old paradoxes that have perplexed so many, which have been stated as follows: thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. Pair of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meet. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything, etc., etc., etc. It explains that in everything there are two poles or opposite aspects, and that opposites are really only two extremes of the same thing, with many varying degrees between them. To illustrate, hot and cold, although opposites, are really the same thing, the differences consisting merely of degrees of the same thing. Look at your thermometer and see if you can discover where heat terminates and cold begins. There is no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms, heat and cold, simply indicate varying degrees of the same thing. And that same thing, which manifests as heat and cold, is merely a form, variety, and rate of vibration. So heat and cold are simply the two poles of that which we call heat. And the phenomena attendant thereupon are manifestations of the principle of polarity. The same principle manifests in the case of light and darkness, which are the same thing, the difference consisting of the varying degrees between the two poles of the phenomena. Where does darkness leave off and light begin? What is the difference between large and small, between hard and soft, between black and white, between sharp and dull, between noise and quiet, between high and low, between positive and negative? The principle of polarity explains these paradoxes, and no other principle can supersede it. The same principle operates on the mental plane. Let us take a radical and extreme example, that of love and hate. The two mental states apparently totally different, and yet there are degrees of hate and degrees of love, and a middle point in which we use terms like or dislike. which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we are at a loss to know whether we like or dislike or neither. And all are simply degrees of the same thing. And you will see, if you will, but think a moment. And more than this, and considered of more importance by Hermeticists, it is possible to change the vibrations of hate to the vibrations of love in one's own mind and in the minds of others. And see, this is what I used to think when I tried to walk righteously. I used to think this is the way, to change my vibration of lust into well-being. You know what I'm saying? Or lust into love, or whatever it may be. And it sounds good for a while. And maybe many who are so-called magicians, they may use this. But this will never bring you ultimate peace. Ultimate peace only resides in the colorless, pure light of the spirit, not in the manifested things. It reads on, many of you who read these lines have had personal experiences of the involuntary rapid transition from love to hate, and the reverse in your own case and that of others. And you will therefore realize the possibility of this being accomplished by the use of the will, by the means of the Hermetic formulas. Good and evil are but poles of the same thing. And the Hermeticists understand the art of transmuting evil into good by means of the application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy, known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of the principle will enable one to change his own polarity, as well as that of others, if he will devote the time and study necessary to master the art. 5. The principle of rhythm. Quote, everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The Kybalion. Now this principle is one of the realest principles in existence. That everything flows in and out. The sun comes, it gets high, it leaves. The moon comes, everything has its rhythm. If you push a pendulum to the left, the force that you push it to the left, it swings also back to the right. And so it's the same with anything in manifestation. The more you love and are attracted and possess something, when you lose it, that same amount of possession, attraction, and hold you had on it, or desire for it, the same when it is lost. The same amount of force swings the other way, and the same amount of degree of depression and hate you will have when it is lost, or grief. And so this is why the ancients tell you must lose yourself. Because in order to find that true peace, you must be detached from all things, detached from the swings of life, while living in it. Because once you get attached, all things come in and they leave out, whether it be people, things, sights, feelings, thoughts. They come and they go. So the teaching is to lose yourself in your source, to lose yourself in God. The principle of rhythm. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion to and fro, a flow and a inflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and low tide. Between the two poles which exist in accordance with the principle of polarity described a moment ago, there is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. This is in the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, minds, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds. in the rise and falls of nations, in the life of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. And it is with this latter that the Hermeticists find that the understanding of this principle most important. The Hermeticists have grasped this principle, finding its universal application and having also discovered certain means to overcome its effect in themselves by the use of the appropriate formulas and methods. They apply the mental law of neutralization. Okay, neutralization might be something. It might be hitting on that, like I said, like I gave that analogy about the screen, the colorless screen and all colors that appear on it. It is neutral from all colors, although it assumes the images of the colors. It is not attached. It doesn't leave when they leave. It doesn't grieve when they leave. It's not happy when they appear. It just is. And so it says they apply the mental law of neutralization. They cannot annul the principle or cause it to cease in its operation, but they have learned how to escape its effects upon them to a certain degree depending on the mastery of the principle. They have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. That is correct. Because once you become one with the source, or your source, or the source of all things, you learn how to operate in the manifested world instead of being carried and swayed by it. This is the solid foundation. In this and similar methods consists the art of the Hermeticist. The master of Hermetics polarizes himself at a point at which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who attain any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously. But the master does this consciously, and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses, who are swung backward and forward like a pendulum. This principle and that of polarity have been closely studied by Hermeticists, and the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them form an important part of the Hermetic mental alchemy. Yeah, and I would say that if you're just dealing with intellect and that's all you know at this time, that would be the most potent law that you can use, is the law of rhythm and being free from the swing of things, because all things swing left and right, come and go. Family members come and go. Your desires come and go. Be unattached from the coming and the going. Be neutralized. This is similar to what it's like to be the spirit. Not uninterested in things, but disinterested. Six, the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but the name for law, not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law, the Kybalion. And this is just a relative law. Again, all these laws are relative to manifestation. And so cause and effect exists in the plane of relative self, in the perspective of an independent, limited self. Cause and effect appears. But in the sense of the spirit, all is caused by spirit. And all possibilities can come out of this spirit and go back into the spirit. Just like, let me give you an example again of the screen. There is no cause and effect to the screen or on the screen, but all causes and effects that appear on the screen, which we call the movie, appear in that realm of the screen, but not, or in the realm that is projected from the screen. But the screen, there is neither cause nor effect. It is the birth of what is assumed to be cause and effect. So, this principle embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect and an effect for every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law, that nothing ever merely happens, that there is no such thing as chance, that while there are various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating the lower, still nothing ever entirely escapes the law. The Hermeticists understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary ordinary plane of cause and effect to a certain degree. By mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causers instead of effects. And when I first read this 4 years ago, I noticed this in the Bible when Christ tells a man to do not return evil for evil. The only time you will return evil for evil is if you are in effect and not the cause. Like if I slapped you, I would be the cause of you doing something. I'm drawing you out to do something that I want you to do. So you are in the realm of cause and effect and being swayed by these things. But you have to come to a place where you are not moved by effects. You are the cause of things, is what it is explaining. The masses of people are carried along, obedient to environment, the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves, heredity, suggestion, and other outward causes moving them about like pawns on the chessboard of life. But the masters, rising to the plane above, dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them, and become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by the wills and environment, by others' wills and environment. They use this principle where am I? I'm sorry. They use this principle instead of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule on their plane, their own plane. In this statement, there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can. And the last principle, principle 7, the principle of gender. Quote, gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, the masculine and feminine principle ever at work. This is true not only on the physical plane, but of the mental plane and even the spiritual planes. On the physical plane, the principle manifests as sex. On the higher planes, it takes higher forms, but the principle is ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many a subject that has perplexed the minds of men. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains the two elements or principles, or this great principle within it, him or her. Every male thing has female element also. Every female contains also the male principle. If you would understand the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, generation, and regeneration, you must understand and study the Hermetic principle. It contains a solution of many mysteries of life. We caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices which are taught under fanciful titles, and which are a prostitution of the great natural principle of gender. Such base revivals of the ancient infamous forms of phallicism tend to ruin mind, body, and soul, and the Hermetic philosophy has ever sounded the warning note against these degraded teachings which tend toward lust, lasciviousness, and perversion of nature's principles. If you seek such teachings, you must go elsewhere for them. Hermeticism contains nothing for you along these lines. To the pure, all things are pure. To the base, all things are base. The end of chapter 2.